Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we begin with Part 1, Preface, from the Doctrine and Literature of the Kabalah by Arthur Edward Waite. Sephirotic scheme, ein sof latent state of deity. The Doctrine and Literature of the Kabalah by Arthur Edward Waite, author of The Life of Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, the unknown philosopher and translator of the works of Eliphas Levi. Preface. Few educated persons, and certainly none belonging to the class of students for which this work is more especially designed, will require to be told that the Kabalah is a form of esoteric philosophy, that it makes for itself a high claim, or that this claim has, from time to time, been admitted by persons who are entitled to our consideration. Nor will it be needful to state that the literature called Kabalistic rose up among the Jews during the Christian centuries which succeeded their dispersal and the destruction of their holy city. It offers a strong contrast to the sacred scriptures of Israel, which are direct, beautiful, and simple, while Kabbalism is involved, obscure, and in many ways repellent as regards its outward form. The Bible is in focus with humanity. The Kabalah is distorted out of all correspondence with the simple senses, and we must grind our intellectual lenses with exceeding care if we would bring it into perspective. From whatever point of view it may be approached, the Kabalah is, however, of importance. It connects with literatures which are greater than itself and with pregnant issues of history. It is part of the history of philosophy, and as such it once entered into the thought of Europe. It is responsible, broadly speaking, for all that strange tissue of symbolism and ceremonial which made up the magic of the Middle Ages. At a later period it sought to transform alchemy. It tinctured many of those conventional practices and beliefs which we term superstition generically, and the guise in which we know them is therefore chiefly a Kabalistic guise. If we might dare to suppose for a moment that behind magic, behind alchemy, behind astrology, there is any mystery of secret and real knowledge, then it is entitled to peculiar respect, because by the hypothesis of some of its defenders, it is through this seemingly impassable literature that the road to the secret lies. A comprehensive account of the Kabalah, in the main bibliographical and historical, but seeking to establish its connections with other forms of occult philosophy, and to determine its influence and importance from more than one standpoint, is the design of the present work, in which special regard has been also paid to the limitations and requirements of English readers, in other words, of those unacquainted with the languages, dead and living, in which Kabbalistic literature has been, with few exceptions, available heretofore. The subject is exceedingly abstruse and has been presented by some of its expositors after a highly technical fashion. In this case, there is no knowledge assumed in the reader, and hence all technicalities have been avoided, while the scope of the enterprise much exceeds the one or two attempts, mostly in foreign tongues, which have been made to simplify the study of the Kabalah. It is the result of an inquiry undertaken in the first instance for my own personal requirements. And I must add, in fairness to my readers and in gratitude to early laborers in this obscure field of research, that the abounding difficulties of the Hebrew and Aramaic originals have been simplified by recourse to the vast storehouses of rabbinical law, entombed for some centuries in such Latin collections as those of Buxtorf, Bartolocci, Pistorius, and Rosenroth. A very large proportion of the materials necessary for an intelligent familiarity with Jewish esoteric tradition are indeed to be found in these. These and other resources have been strengthened subsequently by a considerable range of reading among modern writers in England, France, and Germany, who, directly and indirectly, have concerned themselves with the subject. The work has therefore the learner's advantage of being without pretense and without ambition, but it is believed at the same time to contain all that the ordinary student is likely to require in order to appreciate at their proper worth the various claims preferred on behalf of the Kabalah by those who take it seriously at this day. It is necessary to add that it has been written by a transcendentalist, and chiefly for the use of transcendentalists. In offering materials for their judgment, it also indicates the lines of the conclusions to which the writer leans himself, and seeks to enforce some of them. It has been preceded in England by only 2 books dealing directly with the subject. One is the slight but not inconsiderable essay of Dr. Ginsburg, which is critical rather than descriptive, and is, on the whole, hostile in its tendency. It has been, moreover, long out of print. The other is the Kabalah Unveiled of Mr. S. L. MacGregor Mathers, which is largely translation and commentary, and in addition to other limitations, embraces therefore only a small portion of an extensive literature. The present comprehensive account fulfills a distinct purpose and may, it is hoped, be held to occupy, not altogether unworthily, a vacant place from which there is a wide prospect, by no means deficient in importance for those who are not transcendentalists, for the student of philosophy and history, and for the curious in paths of literature which the elder D. Israeli, despite the bias of his birthright, forbore to enter. The works, containing the esoteric tradition of Israel, as distinguished from the exoteric tradition embodied in the Talmud and its dependencies, fall under two heads. A, the Sefer Yetzirah, or Book of Formation. B, the Zohar, or Splendor. Connected with the Book of Formation are its commentaries, foremost among which are those of Saadia Gaon, Rabbi Azariel ben Menahem, and Rabbi Abraham ben Dior. The treatise itself is comprised within a few pages. The Zohar proper is a commentary on the 5 books of Moses, but a number of distinct treatises are connected with or embedded therein. There are also supplements and additions which must be considered to some extent separate from the original collection. With the Zohar, furthermore, are connected certain important developments and commentaries, some of which are included in the Kabalah Denudata of Rosenroth. They fall under two heads: one, those which deal with the subject matter of the work, and are designed to elucidate certain of its most obscure treatises. 2, those which expound and extend the doctrines of pneumatology which are established in the Zohar. These commentaries are, of course, the work of later Kabbalists, whose dates can be fixed with more or less certainty. Such Zoharistic writings have been sometimes confused with the Zohar. Some classifications of the Kabbalah also include and give prominence to C, the Sefer Sephiroth, that is, the Book of Numerations or Emanations. D, a treatise entitled Esk Metzakf, or Purifying Fire. Whatever their authority and importance, there is no warrant for placing these works among the great classics of the Kabbalah. The Book of Emanations is more properly set down among the dependencies of the Sefer Yetzirah, while that of Purifying Fire occupies a peculiar position, as it is almost without a history, and as it is perhaps the only Kabbalistic treatise which deals directly with alchemy. Its date is doubtful and its authorship entirely unknown. A short but comprehensive account of all the works which have been mentioned above will be found in books 4, 5, and 6. An attempt at such a formal tabulation has not been made previously in the English language. The first 3 books contain a historical and critical survey of the entire subject, showing the philosophical system embodied in the Kabbalah, the method by which it was developed, its connections with previous theosophies designed, like itself, to explain the fundamental mysteries of the universe and the evidences for its antiquity. The 7th book is devoted to the Christian students of the Kabbalah and collects for the first time the opinions of the chief Christian scholars whose names have been connected with Kabbalism. The design of this book is to exhibit a consensus of opinion among all those authorities who are most in vogue with occultists as to what is of value in the Jewish esoteric traditions and as to what is waste substance. On this point, there has never been any real difference of sentiment, except in the modern school of transcendentalism, which, devoid of a proper criterion of judgment and regarding the entire subject from a new standpoint, has been disposed to accept everything indiscriminately as part of the genuine tradition, and has thus esteemed the apparatus of gematria and notarikon as no less important and mysterious than the Zoharistic philosophy of the unconditioned, summed up in Ein Sof. The 8th book deals briefly with other channels through which the esoteric tradition is believed to have been perpetuated in the West, and their connection with the channel of Kabbalism. To those who may approach the work from the historical and bibliographical standpoint, the presence of its leading motive and its appeal to a single class of students may require some explanation. It has, I believe, been suggested that since the appearance of Dr. Ginsberger's destructive criticism, there has been no interest among English scholars in the subject of the Kabbalah. Among mere scholars, that is to say, within the region of research which has only a scholastic horizon, There was no interest which calls for special mention at the period which preceded that work immediately, and it is quite true that there has been as little subsequently to its publication, but not mainly on account of Dr. Ginsburg's criticism. There has been always, or speaking exactly since the days of Thomas Vaughan, Cudworth, and the Cambridge Platonists, a certain class of thinkers for whom the claims made by and on behalf of the Kabalah have possessed great interest and importance, and this class is now much larger than at any date prior to 1865. It also forms intellectually a more respectable and considerable body than the academical reader might be disposed to imagine, in the absence of much acquaintance with the literature by which it is represented. One is obliged to speak of these thinkers under the generic designation of occult students, though the phrase is somewhat inexact and has been used to describe persons who have little title to earnest consideration. A prescribed mode of thought is here, as in other cases, identified ungenerously with the meaner capacities that follow it, and an unpopular subject is classed according to the waste and drift which has collected about it. But the class to which I have adverted does not in itself deserve either ridicule or contempt. It is that which believes in the perpetuation of a secret religious, or more correctly, theosophical tradition from an early period of human history. And this is not manifestly an unwarrantable consequence to draw from the study of religions undertaken philosophically. Now, the Kabalah is not only, as I have said, the occult philosophy of Jewry, it is not only one of the chief sources from which occult science and philosophy have drawn in the Western world, but it has been further represented to be the channel of such a tradition as I have just mentioned. It is therefore not merely reasonable to suppose, but it is true as a fact, that to occultists, and to them almost exclusively, an inquiry like the present must appeal. Other interests are accidental. Their interest is vital. To determine the claims of the Kabalah as a department and inspiring center of occult philosophy is to determine that which is of most real moment regarding it. It is for this reason that I have been led to consider the Kabalah, not indeed as an occultist in the accepted sense, but from the occult standpoint, and to recur with so much frequency to the belief in a secret doctrine of religion, as well as to some other connected questions which need reconsideration at the hands of those who hold them. If I have had in the course of the inquiry to reduce certain illusions to their proper place in the realm of the fantastic, more especially if I have contracted the sphere of what is called mysticism within its proper dimensions, I trust that I shall be justified so far as regards my intention by those whom I have sought to disabuse. From its nature, the foundation of mysticism cannot be in occult science or in occult philosophy, while it is on the historical side alone that it connects with any traditions of the past, popular or achromatic. In the course of the general inquiry, I've endeavored to elucidate the most curious Kabalistic teachings on the subject of the soul, its origin and destiny, the primal state of man, the life of the world to come, and the messianic dream of Jewry. I should add that this study is mainly concerned with the documents, and as such it cannot deal exhaustively with all the issues. It is also bibliographical rather than philosophical. The exhaustive study of the Kabalah would have to be made in connection with that of comparative religion, demanding qualifications to which I can make no claim, and a space for its development which would have been, under any circumstances, impossible. I could wish my inquiry to be regarded rather as the notebook of a student, methodized. Finally, the work has been performed in a spirit of impartiality, and this is perhaps the only side on which it leans towards perfection. There has been no interest at stake which I felt myself compelled to defend, and it is therefore free from the animus of extreme hostile criticism, as well as from the unreasoned assumptions of those in the main non-critical believers who still have the cause of the Kabalah at heart. I claim, furthermore, that I have considered honestly and sympathetically all the interests at stake, including those which the bias of modern scholarship is inclined to overlook or to dismiss in an intolerant spirit. I should add that the history of this book has been checkered and somewhat unfortunate. The manuscript was completed for press at the end of 1898, and in the year following the greater part had been set up and a number of the sheets machined, which were wholly destroyed in a fire at the printers. The delay which thus occurred was considerable in itself, and was increased still further through the suspension of the publishing house by which it was to be issued. In the interval which has elapsed during the course of those fresh negotiations, which have resulted in its production under the auspices of the Theosophical Publishing Society, and during the resetting of the entire work, Dr. S. Carpe has published in Paris his elaborate Études sur les origines et la nature du Zolia, which approaches the subject from a standpoint entirely different to my own, but is at the same time a valuable contribution to our knowledge of Jewish theosophy. And I note with satisfaction that there are many debated points on which, working thus independently, we have reached the same conclusion. Dr. Carpe's study is designed for the scholar and the philosopher, while my own, as already explained, is intended primarily, at least, for the occult student. The Jewish mysticism which led up to and preceded the Zohar is very fully presented by him. But of the influence exercised by that work and of its after-history, he has nothing to tell us. On the other hand, the scheme of my own treatise has led me of necessity to pass lightly over pre-Zoharic theosophy, over Saadia, Ibn Gebirol, Judah HaLevi, Aben Ezra, Maimonides, etc., because they did not affect materially the occult thought of Europe, and to give prominence to Kabbalistic literature in its later phases, to the Christian students of the subject, and to its influence upon other channels of esoteric tradition in Europe. Among the points of agreement between Dr. Carpe and myself may be mentioned the common recognition of the heterogeneous nature of the Zohar, which has justified me in terming it a medley, of the specifically Jewish character of Zoharic mysticism, which has justified me in denying that it is referable exclusively to any one school of thought outside Jewry, of the rapid deterioration of the Kabalah subsequent to the appearance of the Zohar into a thaumaturgic system, of the undue prominence which has been given to the commentaries on the Zohar and the false impressions which have been the result, of the preconception which governed the mind of most Christian students of the literature, by which they were led to regard it as an unacknowledged depository of Christian doctrine, of the absence in the Sefer Yetzirah of any distinctive pantheism or emanationism. There is also considerable similarity both of thought and treatment in the development of the Kabbalistic and typically Zoharic doctrines concerning God and the universe, more especially concerning Ein Sof and creation ex nihilo. It would be easy to multiply these instances, nor less easy to furnish numerous points of divergence, for on the other hand, Dr. Carpe has, I think, laid too much stress on his distinction between the early Jewish mysticism and that of the Zoharic period. Not because such a distinction is either non-existent or unimportant in itself, but because I cannot find that it has been challenged by any qualified writer. And I must, of course, as a mystic, take exception to the conception of mysticism expressed or implied throughout the whole work. Mysticism is not a double doctrine, whether of monotheism for the initiate and of many deities for the vulgar, or of any other such antithesis as the priestcrafts may have derived in the past. But it is outside possibility to do more in the present place than refer to this point and register the bare fact that the students to whom personally I appeal will join issue with Dr. Carpe as to all that follows from his conception, whether it be a matter of simple definition, such as that mysticism is a reprisal of faith against science, or of historical criticism, as for example when he observes that the doctrine of ecstasy is almost unknown to Jewish theosophy, a statement, however, which the author himself abundantly, though not explicitly, modifies at a later stage of his study. To this exception may be added certain points of critical importance to which personally I've only had occasion to refer in passing. The student will also notice a tendency in certain instances to pass over questions of criticism as if there had never been a dispute regarding them. On the one hand, the commentary of Hagan is made use of as if no scholar had challenged its authenticity, and on the other, the late date of the Bahir is taken for granted. Criticism may not have said its last word on either subject, but Dr. Carpe ignores the criticism. The limits of the present work, which as regards the original intention have been already exceeded, have necessitated the omission of a number of subsidiary yet not unimportant matters. I will mention two only: certain developments of pneumatology and eschatology, which are representative of the doctrinal or systematic part, let us say, the hells of Kabbalism; certain historical consequences, such as the mission of Sabbatai Zevi, the Neo-Pietists and the Zoharists; But in each case, these omissions are without real consequence for the occult student. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.